Hi everyone, welcome to the Fox's Kitchen. My name is Bethany and today we are going to be making some vegan red Thai curry. What I like about this recipe is not just you get to make something really spicy and the heat and the flavors. It's just the combination of everything, especially during the fall season. When it comes to the fall or winter season, I more want something spicy, a little more of a homey slash comfy feel. So I usually gear towards either Thai food or Indian food. And today we are going to be venturing into one of those dishes when it comes to Thai. So let's strap ourselves in and make ourselves some red Thai curry. Alrighty guys, before we get started, we are going to be needing some kitchen materials for our cooking today. So we will need at least one small pot to make our rice, and also a wok or a big pot, whichever you prefer. And we will also be needing some measuring teaspoons and tablespoons, and also we will be needing a baking pan as well. You will also need at least 2 big bowls. It's up to you. You can use either 1 or 2 for what I did here. I've only used 1, so if you want to use 1, that is completely fine. So for this recipe, it's going to come up in like 2 steps, and what I mean by that is there's going to be a marinade step, and then there's going to be putting the red curry all together. So for the marinade step, we will need 1 16-ounce of block firm tofu or extra firm tofu, 3 tablespoons of coconut milk, 1 teaspoon of red curry paste, salt and pepper for taste, 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. And for your Thai red curry, you will need 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, 2 tablespoons of red curry paste, 1 small red onion chopped, 4 garlic cloves minced, 1 head of broccoli also chopped, 1 medium of the red bell pepper and 1 medium of the green bell pepper, 3 carrots, medium size or smaller than your normal average, 3/4 teaspoon of sea salt, a teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1 tablespoon of coconut sugar or raw sugar, 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce or liquid aminos or tamari, 1 can of coconut milk. I just used like a regular can, so I didn't believe it was like 16 ounces. So anything beyond that, I did not use. And 1 juice of a lime. There are optional ingredients for this recipe as well. The optionals that you can use are 1 bunch of Thai basil and a 1/2 tablespoon of sambal oelek or sriracha sauce. Alrighty guys, so our first step is going to be doing the tofu marinade. Now I did deviate from the recipe on this, and I'll explain what I did differently. And if you guys don't want to do this method, that's fine. You can follow along with the recipe if you so choose. What I did differently was I preheated the oven for 350 degrees, and then I took my tofu and put it on a cutting board, and I diced it up in cubes. But before I did that, I made sure to squeeze all the water, the moisture out of the tofu. I prefer to use extra firm tofu because it's much easier to get the moisture out. You can use firm tofu, but from what I've been told, if you do use that, it would take a lot longer to get the moistures out. But if you want to, by all means, go for it. Once you have diced or cut up your tofu in cubes, whichever you prefer, you can also tear it up as well and like variation of pieces. You'll put it in a bowl and you'll mix in a 3 tablespoons of the coconut milk. For this one, I did not use coconut milk. I decided to use almond milk only because I did not have enough coconut milk for this. So I kind of briefly read over what milk I needed and just decided to go with the almond milk instead. Next, you'll want 1 teaspoon of the red curry paste. And then the salt and pepper for taste. Now, I'm going to skip over the 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and use 1 tablespoon of the olive oil instead of the coconut oil. Now, reason being why I decided to use olive oil instead of coconut oil is not because of the taste, it's just because for myself, olive oil is better for me because of my prediabetes. Not saying coconut oil is terrible for you, but I've been told by others and also by some research that I've done online that coconut oil is not the best for pre-diabetics. Once you have all those ingredients mixed in, you'll just want to coat the tofu evenly, make sure it's all in there. Once you have your tofu evenly coated, you'll want to set it aside for 15 minutes for it to marinate. Now, I've been told and asked by some people what would I use in substitution for tofu because not a whole lot of people are a big fan of tofu. Sometimes it's just the texture or the taste is bland and they're just not happy with it. So the only thing I can really suggest to them is if they are not a big fan of tofu, then I would recommend tempeh, chickpeas, or jackfruit. Now you can use lentils as well or quinoa. Now with quinoa for a recipe like this where it is a Thai food where it's like a curry base and we will be putting this over rice, I wouldn't recommend quinoa unless if you want to take out the rice and just be like, hey, I just want to use quinoa, then that's fine. While my tofu was marinated, I decided to take this opportunity to wash my broccoli and my carrots in the sink just to get them nice and prepped before I start chopping them. And then I took my garlic cloves and I started mincing them on the cutting board. Now, I know what you're thinking. For garlic cloves, I know a lot of people like to use the mincing tool to make it super easy. For myself, I have become so accustomed to chopping my garlic cloves by hand, like how I'm doing here. Only reason being because used to be in pastry school and my teacher came up to the class and she's like, for the garlic cloves, we will not be mincing them with just like the regular tools. She wanted us to actually do it by cutting them on our cutting board and with just a knife. So at the time it seemed silly, but after that it just stuck with me. So this is how I prefer to do my garlic cloves anymore. When your tofu is done marinating, I put my parchment paper on the baking sheet. And then I put my tofu in the oven for 35 minutes. You can do it for 45 minutes, I come to find, just to give it a little bit of a crispy texture, if you will. But for myself, I use 35 minutes and I just love the texture of how my tofu comes out that way. Now, whether or not you are frying your tofu as the recipe is requiring you of, or you're baking it like me, I find that this is the perfect time to get everything else set up for your rice and also to chop the rest of your vegetables. So next, I take my long whole grain rice, and which requires about 1 cup of rice and then 2 cups of water. You can put like a pinch of salt in there if you so choose, but for me, I'm going to be skipping that for today. And then you just put it on the oven and wait for it to boil. Next, I start chopping up the rest of my vegetables. So I know for a whole lot of people, not everyone is prone to wanting to cut up their own vegetables, that they may want to save some time or they think cutting up vegetables is just too tedious of a job. You can have other options. There are frozen options for broccoli and carrots. I know when it comes to shredding carrots, it's not the best job in the world. It is a bit of a time, it's definitely time consuming. I am not going to argue against that. So if you want to skip out on those, there are frozen options or there's pre-shredded carrots in the vegetable section that I come to find. I just like to do it my way of chopping up all my vegetables and shredding up my carrots, even though it is time consuming. For me, chopping up vegetables is just like that time where I'm in the zone when it comes to cooking, and I get to more or less control how I want to chop it, like what thickness, how long, all that stuff. Now, some of you may also question why did I choose Thai curry for my next section? Reason being because Thai curry, I feel it's one of those dishes where I feel like doesn't get like a whole lot of praise. And it's probably because that not a lot of people are prone to spices or like spicy foods like I am. I'm here to tell you, you can control that heat and still have such a really good dish and brings like so much spice, so much flavor to your dinners or to your lunches. It just gives you that nice, comfy feel that, hey, it's fall or hey, it's wintertime. It's like has that perfect setting. So if you're like me and you want that like nice, comfy, cozy feel and you want that perfect dish for it, curry, I feel, is just like the right food for that. Now, if you're not like me and want something like soup or something of that sort, then by all means go for it. But for me, when it comes to fall seasons or for winter seasons, I just want that spice to help give me that nice, comfortable feel that I'm in this season and brings so much joy and that nice, warm feeling that I'm looking for. Also, an important note, make sure you are watching out for your rice. Since I'm using long whole grain rice, after when it was done boiling in the pot, I put the heat down to low, so pretty much to like the 1 degree digit that you see here. And then I had it simmer for about 45 minutes. Alrighty guys, now that you have all your vegetables prepped and ready to go, we are now ready to start on the Thai red curry. For this section, it's going to be a little simple. So for what you need to do first is you're going to take either a wok or a big pot, whichever you choose. And then you want to add 1 tablespoon of the oil that you have decided to use for this recipe. And then you'll take 2 tablespoons of your red curry paste and add it into the pan. You're going to want it to cook for about a minute or so, depending on how much curry paste you have put into the pan. For me, I have put the entirety of my small little jar of curry paste into the pan only because I want that extra heat. But if you're not a fan of spice, please do not follow what I have done because I do not want you guys to have an overabundance of spice coming out of your mouth. After when you have done that, you're going to want to add your onion which you're going to want it to cook for a little bit, like 5 to 8 minutes. I know when it comes to onions cooking in any type of pan with oil, it doesn't take too long. You just want it to cook until it becomes translucent and it becomes a little more fragrant. Then after that, you're going to want to add your garlic and an extra tablespoon of your oil. For me, I only added about a half tablespoon. I didn't want to go too overboard with the oil because I'm not a fan of adding too much oil to my food whenever I cook. It does give that little bit of extra flavor to your meals and makes things crispy. But for myself personally, I try to avoid as much oil as possible. After when you are done cooking, putting those all together, you'll want to add the rest of your vegetables into the pan. And now this is where it's going to be a little bit of a time constraint. Don't feel too hurried about this. It normally happens when it comes to recipes. Just turn down the heat when you're coming up to this portion. It's not going to take you too long at all, especially with all that we need. Now, if you notice in one portion, I did add a little bit of vegetable stock into my pan. That isn't something that the recipe requires. It's just I noticed that my vegetables were getting a tad bit sticky to the bottom of the pan. And what I've been told is if that happens to you when you're cooking and you don't want to add oil, you can add vegetable broth to the pan so that way your vegetables don't stick entirely to the pan. So whenever I come across that problem, I just add just a little bit. Don't do too much, maybe like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, and then you'll be fine. So for your next step, you're going to want to add the sea salt and black pepper. And the coconut sugar or regular sugar, whichever you prefer. I used maple syrup because for me, that's just a little better for me. And then lastly, you'll want to add your light soy sauce or coconut aminos. And then you'll want to stir it all together and let it cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, one thing I did do a little differently here was after when the tofu was done cooking in the oven, I did take it out and I put it in with the rest of the vegetables in the wok before letting it cook for that 15 minutes. Now for the recipe, if you have noticed that after when your tofu is done, it doesn't require you to cook an additional 15 minutes with what you're doing with the vegetables. Instead, it wants you to do it after those 15 minutes are done. So that's just something that I did a little differently, but honestly, I didn't notice anything that stood out as being like wrong with the recipe after when I did this. It still came out great and I have no qualms over it. After when your vegetables are done cooking, then you'll want to add in your coconut milk. I use the light coconut milk. Whether or not you want to use regular coconut milk or light coconut milk, it's up to you. For me personally, I use the light, and this is just one of the healthier options, one of the better routes for me to go when it comes to food options. After once that has been put into the wok, you also want to add in your lime juice. And then let it simmer for about 5 minutes. After when your curry is done cooking along with your rice, you'll want to serve the curry over rice. And if you guys want to do the optional ingredients above what was referred to in the recipe, Now is the time to top them off if you so choose. For myself, I personally did not do this. And yeah, you have a delicious looking curry full of flavor and heat and so much more. And I hope you guys enjoy.
So what I love about this recipe is that, and that, aside from it being full of vegetables, you get to add tofu and also as much as curry paste as you want. When it comes to curry paste, you don't have to follow the recipe exactly. It does require 2 tablespoons, but if you are afraid of spicy and want just like maybe like a neutral flavor, just add like a tablespoon and maybe keep adding a little more at a time until it gets you to that right amount of flavor slash spice if you want to. Another thing that I will say that I did differently here was with the tofu. I baked it instead of frying it because with the recipe that I used on Pinterest, it does require you to fry the tofu. I just more or less bake it because to me, if I fry it, it feels a little too much on the overboard of oily. So I prefer to gear away a little from that. Another thing that you may have noticed is I added vegetable stock. The reason being is when my vegetables, during when I was cooking, my vegetables were sticking to the pan. It was getting slightly dry. So I have been told by others, and I've also noticed it on other vegan YouTubers, they will add vegetable stock just to add some moisture to the pan. That way you don't have to add oil, which I prefer. So with this recipe, guys, I'm going to rate this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Only reason being because it is spicy and it does have flavor to it. However, I'm more of a spicy gal and it's not hitting the spice level for me. So with that being concluded, I hope you guys will enjoy this as much as I do, especially during the fall season. So enjoy, guys.